I'm Richard North, and you're listening to the Weekly Dartscast.
1 hour and 80.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, joined as always by my co-host, darts statistician Burton DeWitt. Burton, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing all right too, and a busy show for you guys this week. We've got a few guests coming up over the course of the show, and lots of darts to chat about as well. The darts at home still going on, and darts in person as well. Social distancing darts got underway at the weekend with the German Super League, the first tournament incorporating the social distancing. Could it be a possible blueprint for the PDC's return to plans, do you think?
I think it can be to some extent, but the one big difference, and it touches on something that Barry Hearn said when we had him on the show about a month ago, a little over a month ago now, is that the German Super League is limited to people from Germany, and therefore it's not an international event. The PDC is not just international now, but it is global, where you have 2 tour card holders who reside in Australia, 3 Australians total, but Simon Whitlock, of course, resides in the south of England, but 2 tour card holders that generally reside in Australia. You have one in Canada, you have one in Hong Kong. So this is maybe not as global. Oh, not to forget Devin Peterson, who splits his time between South Africa and England. So this really is maybe not as global as the PDC wants it to be, and not as global as it will be 10, 20 years from now. But it is already, to some extent, global. That is not the case of the German Super League. So you do have to deal with the fact that countries are reopening at different paces and at different speeds. And until you are able to get all the tour card holders together, it'll be tough to restart. But yes, to some extent, this is what's going to have to happen, at least for some time. It might be safe at some point to open crowds in some countries, and maybe the PDC will have to move TV events to places where it is safe to have crowds, because that's a big part of the income. It's a big part of the revenue that the PDC generates, not just through the Euro Tours, but also for the TV events. But I think it is going to be, at least to some extent, a blueprint. It's still at least a month, if not longer, off. We'll know more in the coming weeks as the decisions made on the World Match Play. But it's an example, but it's one that requires that we still need some time before we can get there.
Yeah, you've got to think that the top guys at the PDC, they were looking at events in Germany over the weekend with the German Super League, and probably got some of their fingerprints on it as well, because obviously PDC Europe are running the event affiliated with the PDC themselves, so they'll have known what their plans really were for it. And it's a tournament that's going on for 5 weekends, kicked off last weekend, and as you say there, a big point about it, 16 players, 2 groups, 8 players in one group, 8 in the other, and they've split it into different weekends, so only 8 players are playing in one weekend, the other 8 in another weekend. And when you're thinking about PDC events and the first events that we could expect to come back, Players' Championship events, 128 players that play in these events, how are you going to be able to keep all of them socially distant in the venues that they have? And of course, if you've got players flying over to the UK, as you touched on a few things there, but when they get over here as well, the accommodation, the hotels, you've got to make sure that everything is going to be safe for them. They're going to be able to play. And with the flying restrictions as well, players that are coming over and having to quarantine either before or after, or even both as well. It's a very difficult one, I think, at the moment. But yeah, just watching some of it at the weekend. Obviously, I don't speak much German, but able to watch some of the darts that they were doing and seeing how it would have worked, how it would look on TV with no crowd, and with the players being told when they can and can't approach the oche by the lollipop man with the green and the red either side saying yes, you can throw your darts. It was quite interesting, quite unique, but I certainly think it'll be something the PDC will be looking at and trying to work out how they can get things going again when it's safe to do so.
Now, the PDC have said that a decision on the World Match Play will be made by Friday the 5th of June, if not earlier. What do you envisage happening with the what most people would agree is the second most prestigious event on the calendar?
It's a tough one, and Tuesday last week the PDC put out an update on the World Match Play, saying they've been in regular contact with the UK government, and we're 8 weeks away now. I think 8 or 9 weeks away now from what would be the start date of the World Match Play, the July the 18th, and PDC are saying that by the 5th of June or on that date, they're going to make a decision. And their plans really are at the moment, if they can't get it to be played on that date, 18th to the 26th of July, the plans right now are they don't want to cancel the event completely there. What they would like to do is push the event back to later in the year, later in 2020, and try and get the event played. But it's difficult if it does get postponed. There's not a lot of dates where you could fit in the 9 days without affecting other events, and maybe they do squeeze it into a shorter period of time, less than 9 days. But as you touched on there with the crowds as well, they'll want to get the match play on with the crowd. It's one of the biggest events there is on the calendar. I believe it's the second biggest on the calendar. Such a special event, but if they're not allowed to have the crowds in, then I think they probably would look to push it further back. And as we spoke about on our last podcast that we did together about the qualifying criteria, when you've got not many events going towards it this year and last year like you would on a usual year, then they probably would want to get some events in first before their first event back is the second biggest event of the year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. And I mean, if it can go ahead without a crowd, it's not the end of the world, because it's very possible that you're going to have to go ahead for much of the rest, if not the entire rest of the season, without a crowd. And as you said, it's the second most important event in the calendar. That said, unless you make some sort of change, and I think I talked about it last show or 2 shows ago, maybe expanding the field to make it more fair and to give more players an opportunity to plan it, you've completely curtailed the qualification structure for it and the qualification system for it. And it's just not gonna be the same if this is the first event back or one of the first event backs and we've had half the qualifying season gone. I think postponing it makes the most sense. If you're able to play that time even behind closed doors, then that's a great time to start catching up on the Players' Championship events, especially if the players are able to travel to it. We still don't know what the case is going to be like in 2 months, and it's tough to say whether Kyle Anderson and Damon Head will be able to get there from Australia, whether Jeff Smith will be able to get there from Canada, let alone some of the players from continental Europe, as travel restrictions slowly ease and flights have to start coming back, let alone the travel restrictions. You also need the flights to exist. And maybe that will be a good time to, if you're able to play, to not have the World Match Play, but to have 10 Players' Championship events over a couple weeks. I don't think the match play will go ahead at that time, but I do think it will go ahead this year. I think we might see some of the other events get canceled, but this one will eventually be played, even if the Winter Gardens doesn't actually see action until closer to winter.
Now we move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it's with the most recognisable face in the PDC home tour. It's the host and commentator, Dan Dawson.
I'm joined today by 2-time major champion Dan Darts Dawson. Dan, how are you?
I remain a 2-time major champion. Thank you very much for giving my full title, Burton. I'm not bad. I hope you're doing well yourself.
Yes, and thank you for joining us. It's been a busy 4 to 5 weeks for you. 32 days, 32 groups, 32 nights commentating on the PDC home tour. Before that, the PDC, though, experimented with a few of the Darts at Home events. How did you find the workings out of those test events?
They were good fun, really. I mean, before the home tour was created into a more formal event, which was always going to be geared towards somebody winning the group and progressing to something, and the players are getting money for taking part. It was just something to do, really. It was just something for the PDC to remind people that darts still existed and give some of their players just something constructive to do of an evening. So it was just a bit of fun. And I think if you go back and watch those Darts at Home events, I know the home tour is a pretty laid back kind of evening, but those ones, people were just sort of mucking about and just having a laugh, really. And there was quite a bit of banter. Obviously, when you get Matt Edgar involved in anything, there's going to be a lot of chat. But yeah, it was fun and it was different, and it was just a way of, in the early days of the lockdown, of just trying to get some darts on the go, because there was nothing else to watch in terms of live sport.
So when the PDC came to you and said, we're going to do a home tour for 32 consecutive nights and we want you to present it, what was your initial reaction?
Great, to be honest. I mean, it sounds kind of daunting with 32 consecutive nights, but having done the first 2 home tour events. They were just good fun to be involved in. I didn't at that point know exactly what it was going to look like. We had X number of tour card holders. I can't remember. It was probably about just over half who immediately said, yeah, I'll play, definitely. But then when others saw what it was like, they kind of got more interested. So, I don't know how many we got in the end. It was more than 90. It might have been 100. There's probably 20 or 30 players who either didn't want to or couldn't play for various reasons. So the fact that we've got everybody involved, I think it was really good. It was nice to, I go around with the tour and I obviously do the Pro Tour events and the Euro Tour stuff, but there's still players on the tour that I've not really had a great deal of interaction with. So, having a chat with the likes of Gert Nenches and talking to him about, his setup at home and what got him into darts, or Mike Kuyvenhoven or Mike van Dijvenbode, some of the foreign lads who haven't made it to big TV events. It's good to be able to talk to them about that and just hear their passion for the game coming through. Some guys had really good nights, some guys had absolute stinkers of nights, but at least they all got an opportunity to be involved. So yeah, I liked the idea from the off. I didn't realise I was going to be doing all 32 in a row, but I'm certainly glad that I did.
Well, it was a very quick turnaround from when they announced it. Barry Hearn, of course, on our show previewed that it was going to be announced, and then a few days after the interview, it got started on that Friday. Going into it, did you have any expectations for how it was going to go?
No, not really. I kind of went into it thinking, right, this will be where we'll see some mad stuff. We'll see people throwing 112 averages all night because they're on the practice boards at home and they will be... there's no excuse. There's no hiding place. Darts players have been telling me for a decade that on the practice board at home, I do magical, wondrous things. Didn't go like that. And a lot of them, particularly in the early couple of weeks when perhaps they hadn't watched any of the home tour stuff prior, they just thought, hey, I'll be fine. I'll play on me practice board. It'll be just like practicing at home and I'll be brilliant. It didn't work like that. There was pressure. There was genuine pressure. And once you apply pressure, then people feel a little bit out of their comfort zones. And I think some people feeling pressure on a board where they never feel pressure any other time, it actually did really hit them hard. Peter Wright, the first night, he played dreadfully. And then he managed to, he pulled himself together by the final night and qualified for the next stage of the tournament. So I think, yeah, it's just a different form of the game. And it's something that I didn't really appreciate. I certainly think that Daniel Larson and players like that who've played quite a lot of online darts have benefited from that because they know what they were going into. They knew what the rhythms of the game and the feel of it would be like. And so those guys with a bit more experience just had a little bit of a head start on some of the other lads who'd never done it before.
A few teething problems early on, but the home tour seems to have got into a stride and providing nightly entertainment for darts fans and playing opportunities for the players. But looking back on the first phase now, that's finished. Who's caught your eye so far?
In terms of the standard, the three I'd be looking at would be Luke Woodhouse. Obviously, he had the performance of the whole thing in smashing Gerwyn Price 5-0 with a 9-darter. You would look at Joe Cullen, who was incredible over the course of the night, 106 and a bit average. And Jose de Sousa, who only lost one leg over the course of his 3 games. But then there are other people that you would definitely want to give a mention, the likes of Gert Nenches, Carl Wilkinson. Carl Wilkinson won 2 games on the tour all year and then won all 3 on the night. So there are people who were performing above their normal level and played really well. And they should be recognised for that. But players like, look, you guys you're up to date with the tour. Players like Cullen, de Sousa, and indeed Luke Woodhouse, they've all played some magnificent darts. I think Jose de Sousa is going to be massive, and I don't know why Joe Cullen isn't more massive than he already is. I asked him on the home tour, why have you not won loads more than you have? You see it on the Euro Tour on a regular basis. You put Joe Cullen on a big stage and he can play absolutely incredibly. I think it's a tragedy that Joe Cullen has not achieved more in the years he's been playing darts. He's put it down to a mental thing and not enough application. And I hope that maybe that will change over the coming years because he's certainly got the talent to be a top player.
On only the second night, we saw Luke Woodhouse throwing a 9-darter, which attracted a lot of headlines in the world of sports. What, though, would you say was your standout moment from the home tour's first stage?
I think if you're looking for an individual moment, then you would look at Luke Woodhouse and his 9-darter. I think the best checkout I have seen is from Mike DeDecker. He took 135 out against Steve Brown in a leg he needed to win. He needed to win by 5 legs to 2 to top the group, and that managed to get him the breaker throw. And he ended up, I think he held throw next leg to win 5-2 and just snuck ahead of Bomber to win the group. And then Steve quite rightly pointed out that it's quite difficult when you've got an idiot like me pointing out every single leg what the score is, and Mike DeDecker might just pull this off. But look, that again, it's one of the home tour things. That's the way it's set up. It's the same for everybody, and it's one of those things they've got to deal with. It could, the home tour could have looked very different. The home tour could have been 10 big name players. They've got great setups that are all sent to them by the PDC, fabulous internet connections, and they just play each other over and over and over again night after night and do that. But that's not what it was about. It was about getting as many different players involved, supporting them and giving them a chance to play in some meaningful tournaments. It's not just a cartel or a closed shop for the big names. So that's how we've had people like Luke Woodhouse and Gert Nenchez come through, Ryan Murray, Mike DeDecker. I mean, nobody, I don't think, if you wanted a load of, just a bunch of big names playing, I'm not sure many people had put Jose de Sousa in there, and yet he's managed to go through and win all 3 of his games with the loss of only 1 leg. So I think the plurality of it has been one of its strengths, even if it has been a technical issue on some nights, because obviously different folks have different setups at home, and some people can't work a phone.
One of the fun parts of the home tour has been the players having to call their own scores in the games, and we've seen some amusing impressions of referees' 180 calls, most notably Paul Hinks. But from what you've seen, which player has had the best 180 call so far?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think. That's a very good question. And to be honest, off the top of my head, at the end of 32 nights of this, I can't quite remember. I'm mercifully thankful that the vast majority of players, even Jose, were getting their counting right. There was only one time, I think, in the whole tour, or the first 32 nights of it, where a player has gone for a checkout, gone, check, yeah, I've taken it, and then I've had to go, that's not right, pal. And it was Yoza who took out 92 when he wanted 94. So he came back and pinned the double one anyway. But look, I'm not Kurt Bevins or Russ Bray or George Noble. I'm all right with me counting and me maths, but I tell you what, it's difficult, particularly when you're not 100% sure where a dart is lying in the board sometimes if you've got a dodgy connection. But yeah, they've helped me out over the course of this first month of action, so I'm just glad of that. As for the best 180 call, somebody was doing a different impression every single time they hit one. I can't think who it was, but it was a decent array. It might have been Cullen, because he hit plenty of them. But yeah, I can't answer that one, I'm afraid, Alex. Sorry, pal.
Well, I do a different 180 call every time I hit one. Luckily, that's not that often, so I never have to do a 180 call. Now, from your role as a presenter, it's been great to see the pre- and post-game chats you've had, as well as the in-game chats with the players on screen. You follow the tour a lot. Has that been one of the best parts, though, for you, helping bring out the players' personalities and backstories?
Yeah, and it's something that we need to do. And by we, I mean everybody involved in darts needs to do more. And to be honest, lads, I think you're very good at it. In that you go and get interviews with a lot of fringe players that you're not seeing interviewed on the telly regularly. Look, we know what Gary Anderson's like. We know what Michael Van Gowen's like. They have a microphone put in front of their mouths every single time they're playing in the Premier League and major tournaments, because they're the big stars, and that's how it works. People want to hear from them. But you won't learn the personalities. You won't get the stars of tomorrow, and you won't have fans invested in them and wanting them to do well until you hear from them, until they get an opportunity to speak. And some of these guys are interesting or have great backstories or are just funny. So I think the more we can do that as a sport, as an industry, as journalists, whatever, then I think that helps. I think there are a lot of really interesting stories to be told about the players in darts, because they are normal people doing extraordinary things. And I think that's what makes them relatable. That's what's been the case for decades in this sport. People watch what looks like a normal person who's had a normal life up there like a superhero on stage and being watched by millions of people doing stuff that very few people can do. So I think the more we can do that, the more we can shine a light on these guys and give them an opportunity just to be who they are and tell their stories. I think that benefits everyone, because I'm sure there'll be people who've dipped in and out of the home tour, or maybe have watched it religiously. They might be, proper darts anoraks like myself, but they might have learned a bit about one of the players, something about them that they didn't know before. And it means next time they see them playing on telly in the Grand Slam or the UK Open or the World Championship, they go, oh, it's that guy. Oh, it's that guy who runs a load of supermarkets in Sweden or whatever. And it just gives them a bit more of an identity, and it helps people relate to them. And I think that's a good thing, and we should be doing more of that. But as I say, I think you guys are very good at doing it, because you get some interviews with players that, by and large, they're overlooked by a lot of the darts media.
Now, Darts at Home has grown massively in the last month or so. Obviously, your nights have been spent on the home tour, but have you had much of a chance to see what the competition are offering as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a bit of the Moda stuff. I've watched a bit of the remote darts league when I finished, or just watched it a bit on YouTube, because I'm good mates with little Richard, who's obviously presenting that. I think, like, technologically, they're excellent, and they're really good, and it's darts. I mean, that's excellent. You've got some great names in the Modus ones. I think they've all done a really good job. They're obviously coming at it from different angles. It's a different technological challenge to be broadcasting from Hong Kong and Australia, Canada and Sweden, potentially all in the same night with the home tour. But it's there to support the players. I think there's been some very, very good stuff that's been taking place in all the various online dart leagues. And look, if people are interested in watching it, it gives the players something to focus on and keep them sharp when the darts returns. I'm all for it. Just keep playing. I mean, I quite like keeping an eye on the sort of amateur ones or something. The little leagues that aren't even streamed, just to see how players are getting on. You lads know I play in a league with myself and Chris Murphy. Just play each other over and over again. We've been doing that remotely. I've noticed that you've got the Bang Average Darts League that's kicked off, which looks a great idea for people who've got very little talent at actually playing the game like myself. But it's one of the beauties of this sport, isn't it? You can play it remotely. It's not the same. It's not quite as good, but it's not a bad substitute.
Now we're about to move into the second phase of the home tour next week with the playoffs. Are there any plans, though, to tinker with the broadcast or introduce new features? Or will it be similar to what we've seen so far for the first 32 nights?
I think it will be similar. I mean, they're changing the format slightly, so it's going to be best of 11 instead of best of 9, so it'll be slightly longer as we go into the second stage. In terms of the technical aspects, to be honest, lads, I don't know. All of the sort of decisions about what it looks and sounds and feels like, that's come from the PDC. I just basically do what they tell me to do. It will be essentially me in my basement chatting and introducing players. And look, if there are any improvements, we've tinkered with things. We use different software as it's got on to improve picture quality and stability of connections and things. I would hope that now that everybody has played once or twice on the tour, and we've nailed down any teething issues, that it should go without a hitch. Whether they're planning any more sexy developments in how it's going to look, I don't know. Watch this space. I suppose there's not a great deal of time to turn that around between now and the start of it. But we'll see. I mean, they're working all the time, these guys, to try and make it a better program. I mean, it's that's one of the things. It's being shown on TV in Australia and across Europe and stuff like that. So there's a lot of challenges that need to be overcome to make sure that you've got a product that can go on those platforms.
Sticking with your work for the PDC, last week you also held a debate with Wayne Mardle, Rod Studd and Stuart Pike discussing the top 5 best players ever, excluding Scott Rand, Mark Walsh and Co Stompy. Who makes your 5?
I mean, mine is similar to those. I think everybody in the world picks the same top 3. It's just what order you put them in. And then it's who do you give 4 and 5 to. I might be tempted to put John Lowe in there. One of the guys that, I mean, Bob Anderson's certainly one that that didn't really get much of a mention. And I know it might be a case of recency bias, but I genuinely, in my time covering darts, Peter Wright is so good. And I really do think that, yes, obviously he got over whatever was holding him back in beating Van Gerwen at the World Championship, beating him in the final. But when you look at how many major finals he's been in and how many he could have won and some he definitely should have won. You know, if you'd given him the Premier League where he missed 6-match darts, if you'd given him the Grand Prix where he should have been 4-0 up on Van Gerwen, he should have won the Champions League of darts. There's 3 that definitely should be in the bag already. Then he starts accruing those major titles, and he was very, very close in other ones as well. He starts getting right up there in terms of the most decorated major winners in PDC history. And when you start doing that, when you couple that with the averages he's thrown, the fact that he's been going for quite a long time now and forced his way to where he is. Phil Taylor himself said he should be world number 1. And if he doesn't get to world number 1, he needs to kick up the backside. I genuinely think the way he plays the game, the surgical way he manoeuvres his darts, he throws any set of darts, of course, and can hit 110 averages. I really do think that he's in the discussion for one of the greatest players I've ever seen. Whether he makes the top 5, I don't know. But certainly Bristow, Taylor and MVG. And I think I'd probably be putting Taylor top of that list. I think everybody picks those top 3.
Well, Peter Wright might make it to number 1 if events keep getting postponed. And that brings us to our next question. Just a couple more questions. Beyond the home tour now, a lot of eyes on where the PDC goes next, with a decision on the World Match Play's current dates set to be made in the next couple of weeks. What's your feeling on what happens with World Match Play this year?
Well, I mean, I don't know, Burton. We're all guessing, aren't we? I know that I'm sure TV companies would want to have some darts to show. You know, the likes of Sky or ITV, they would want to see something on the telly. But then we all know that when we had that UK Open, which was hit by the weather, it's weird when you don't have any darts. The fans are such an integral part of the viewing experience. It's not like we did. One of the charity events, and we had Mark Selby, the snooker player, on, and there's talk about the World Championships going ahead at the Crucible in not very far away, a few weeks' time. And you know, he agrees himself. Yeah, it's weird playing with no fans, but when you're watching on the telly, it's not that much different. You know, a ripple of applause for a good shot, a bit of cheering at the end of a frame or the end of the match, but the vast majority of that broadcast, it is basically just quiet and 2 guys on the snooker table. You don't even get that many shots of the crowd. It's so different with darts, and I don't know whether it'll go ahead. I think there are perhaps more pressing concerns about whether you do it with fans or not, in the how do you do it fairly? We don't know how we compensate for all these tournaments going in terms of the rankings and who qualifies for things. What happens if certain players from certain countries, and potentially quite a few players from certain countries, can't get to the UK, aren't allowed, have to quarantine for a long while, or would have to quarantine a long while if they went back? Can you put a ranking tournament on if 10, 20, 30% of your players just aren't in a position to come and compete? Is that fair? I don't have the answers to these questions, and I'm kind of relieved that I'm not in a position to make these decisions, because I think they're very, very difficult ones to make. And I think whatever decision you come to, then people are going to be disappointed, whatever, depending on what side of the line they fall.
And finally, once we do return to normality one day, what are you most looking forward to in darts? Is it the Euro Tour being back, being able to play Chris Murphy in person in the Premier League, or maybe something else?
I mean, look, I will not deny that the feeling of crushing Chris Murphy, whether remotely or in person, is a majestic one, Alex. And it's one that I cannot get enough of. But it will be the Euro Tour. And I mean, look, this summer, we were supposed to go to Budapest for the first time. That was amazing. For the first time in my career, I was going on the World Series events, which would have been New York and Australia and New Zealand. I've always wanted to go to Australia and New Zealand. Of course, that's not going to happen this year. Fingers crossed I'll be able to be part of the team next year. We'll see. I realise that sitting here complaining about, oh, we could have gone to all these lovely foreign cities when there are much greater concerns that affect the world may sound a little bit petty, but I'm just going to indulge myself for a little while because, to be honest, Euro tours all over Germany, in the Netherlands, in Budapest, I mean, it would have been brilliant. And it will be when it starts up again, but it's just a frustrating time. But one we all have to endure because, as I say, there are greater worries at the moment.
Yes, there are, though, with football resuming in Germany and Estonia this week, darts can only be right around the corner. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, gentlemen. And yes, darts has resumed in Germany, and it's actually created the greatest job in this industry. And I hope at some point you can get an interview with Deddy off the Euro Tour, who operates the social distancing lollipop just to tell players to stop and go, because that is a revelation I did not know darts needed, but it turns out it's hilarious and therefore good.
Thanks again to Dan for joining us. Now some exciting news, we hope, for our listeners. We're linking up with Low Six, a sports pool betting app. You can play against your friends. You can play against us as well. Of course, the Premier League Prediction League that we've been running on this podcast for the last few years, that got postponed with the Premier League, all those events being pushed back. But this is your chance to go up against us. A guaranteed prize pot going to be available for each contest that we do. We're doing the Weekly Dartscast Lucky Dip. It's a different contest to all the other ones that they do. So we've picked a few games from the Modus League and we've picked a few games from the Remote Darts League. And essentially all you've got to do is pick who you think is going to win the games, or if you think either of them are going to be a draw. Of course, in the Remote Darts League, you can have a draw. So promo code Dartscast for a free £3 bet with Low Six. Get involved in our Lucky Dip. It's a £2 entry and they're putting on a £25 prize pool. And if we get loads of you in, if more people enter, then they've said they're going to push the prize pot up. So get involved with that. Look for Low Six wherever you download your apps, or go to weeklydartscast.com/Low6. And we're just going to have a quick chat about some of the games that you're going to be picking on Friday tomorrow when you're listening to this on the Thursday. We'll start off with the Modus side of things. You're pretty hot on Jared Cole. You've picked him to win both his games that we've picked out there. But let's talk about the final game that's going to be taking place on the Friday in the Modus. Mike Warburton against Fallon Sherrick, and you've gone with Fallon to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, Fallon's been in some electric form in the home events. Okay, she wasn't able to win against Phil Taylor, but I think she played okay in that match, all things considered. And I just think she's coming in better form overall. That said, I mean, these matches from home are difficult to predict because you really just don't know how a player is gonna take to not the pressure, but just the entire weirdness of it. But I think Fallon's been getting more attention. She's more used to this, and I just think she's gonna have a little bit too much for Mike Warburton in this one.
Well, I've gone the other way on this one. I'm sticking with Mike Warburton, obviously someone that we've known on this podcast for a few years now. When he won the Welsh Open a couple of years ago and met him at the World Masters last year, he was delighted to meet me for the first time, meet the guys beyond the Weekly Dartscast. So I'm backing him in the game against Jared Cole, and I'm going to back him to beat Fallon Sherrick as well. Let's move over to the Remote Darts League. That got back underway this week. The second stage of that, of course, these best of 10, so you can have a draw in this, but with all our games, we've picked a winner. We're not going with the draws. And one of the games that I want to pick out is that All-American tie that we're going to see. Larry Butler, of course, a legend in darts, North American darts, a former world match play winner, going up against Joe Cheney, who's had some success in the BDO over the last couple of years. And you've gone with Joe Cheney on that one.
Yeah, Larry Butler's just not been as consistent over the last few years. Obviously had some health problems, but even before that, he's not the same player he was even 6 years ago, when he was making major finals still over in the BDO. Joe Cheney has been on the up recently, and I think I picked him in both of them because I'm a little bit biased, and I'm going to pick the American if I think the American has a chance. But I think just right now, Joe Cheney's playing a little bit better, but Larry Butler obviously has the game, and he'll come out of nowhere. He came out of nowhere 5 years ago at the World Masters to make the final. He came out of nowhere at the World Match Play 25 years ago to lift the trophy. Who knows? Maybe he'll be world champion on New Year's Day this year. this upcoming year, but I'm not picking him in this one.
Yeah, great to see Larry still playing, and like you, I've gone with Joe Cheney for that one. But you've also gone with Joe Cheney for the last game on our picks against Jim Williams. I've gone for Jim Williams on that one, and like I said, if you want to get involved, it'd be great to get you guys involved. Obviously, we don't have the Premier League Prediction League running at the moment. Got to say a few terms and conditions as well. You've got to be over the age of 18, UK residents only, new customers limit to one per person. Terms and conditions apply, and please gamble responsibly. If you want to find out more about that, begambleaware.org, and of course go to weeklydartscast.com/low6 and get involved in the Lucky Dip on Friday. We're going to be back to chat a little bit more about the home tour in a moment, but let's get to our next guest, and it is with the owner of the North East Darts Promotions, Scott Hunt. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the owner of the North East Darts Promotions, Scott Hunt. Thanks for the time, Scott. How are you doing?
Hi Alex, yeah, great, thanks very much. Thanks for inviting us on the show here.
No worries at all, and we'll come on to your involvement with the darts scene in the North East in a moment. But firstly, going back to where it started for you in darts, obviously you're the older brother of the PDC tour card holder Adam Hunt. Did your interest in darts first come from the family?
Yes, I'll be honest, I'm 31 now, so my first interest in darts playing, I would have been about 25. I've always followed Adam. He's getting on now. He's probably been kicking around for about 10 years since the first youth tour, I would imagine. So I've always followed him as a fan, but my interest came from watching him and then getting involved playing in the pubs and clubs myself.
Okay, so growing up then, was darts something that was more that Adam was interested in rather than yourself? Obviously saying there that you didn't really get into it until your mid-20s.
Yeah, so Adam, I think my mum and dad bought him a dartboard when he was, I couldn't tell you the age, he was a young age, bought him one for Christmas, and I think it was like a duck to water, really. Growing up, I played football at a high standard when I was younger, so that was kind of my main interest. We've got another brother, David. He's a massive golf player. He plays a lot of golf, so it was kind of split across the three of us. But as I got a little bit older, didn't play as much football. I started watching Adam, like I said, and then moved in to play myself, and here we are today.
From yourself playing, we come on to the North East Darts Promotions, which you're involved in now heavily. How did that first come about?
So my kind of early working career, I used to run club nights. So I was an event promoter, ran nightclub events, different things in bars in Newcastle. As I progressed, I started running events around the country. Manchester, Leeds, even went to Northern Ireland International, Dublin. So like the event side of it and kind of the creative side of it came from there. I've always been enthusiastic with building events, concepts and ideas. When I got into the darts, there's a guy from Northumberland called Tab Hunter. He was running a website that had all the kind of competitions that were running throughout the Northeast, and he kind of did reporting on a lot of the professionals and all the kind of the diary throughout all the competitions in the Northeast. He, in 2017, it was January 2017, he decided to call it a day. So there was kind of a gap in the market there to take over something, and with my background and what I was doing, I thought I could take it to the next level. So that's how I took over, started a new website, took over the diary, kind of promoting and whatnot. And as that progressed and I got a little bit more of a following, a bit of a back, and I started putting on big events. So at the end of 2017 in December, I ran the Newcastle Open, and that was 256 players. It was held in a hotel in the Northeast. We had players like Nathan Aspinall, Andy Bolton, Adam, Chris Dobie entered, a lot of big other names entered as well. Gary Robson, he entered, there's a few others. But that's how it progressed, and as the years have gone on, I've put on more bigger events, and that's what I'm just looking to do in the future. A lot more big events, and I suppose that's it so far.
And you touched on the website there that you're involved in as well, northeastdarts.com, updating on the local competitions, the diary events. Just talk to us about the darts scene in the Northeast, though. We hear an awful lot about how big it is there. What is it like?
Yeah, so obviously it's been around for years. Everyone knows the Northeast up here. The calibre of people that are coming through, just proving now. We've got 5 Northeast lads that have got tour cards. So it just shows how strong the field is up here, and there's so many other names out there that probably haven't got the opportunity or chance to take it to the next level, but they can compete on that level. It's such a hard field around here. The website, so I kind of And like I said, I kind of, at the moment, control the diary and all the competitions, but I promote all them for these people as well. So across the whole North East, from the borders right down to touching North Yorkshire, we'll cover all that. Pushing over towards Cumbria way as well. Cover all those kind of competitions, the full diary every Saturday, Sundays, chocker throughout the year. And there's a lot of money at stake and a lot of money on offer for these players to go and compete. And that's what does bring the standard higher and higher, is the money on offer.
And looking at the promoting event side of things, you mentioned one of the events there, that the Newcastle Open, which attracted a big field and some big names there. It could be that one, but what is the biggest achievement so far for you, do you think, in promoting events? Is it that one, or is there another moment that you look back on more fondly?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. It hadn't been done for a long time in the North East, holding an event of that size. I know that Gary Wood, BBC official, held an event years and years ago in the North East, and he had a lot of entries, and that was one of the biggest in the area. But I think that's probably my biggest achievement, yes. What I need to do now is, and moving forward, is I need to start looking at sponsorship opportunities to then take it to the next level. I did have a sponsor back in the day to be able to hold that, but again, it's just moving forward and trying to build these connections that allows me to then put these events on for the people. I'd say, but and as obviously it's been happening recently, maybe that I've just run a 256-man competition at the weekend online. That was probably harder to run and manage than what I did previously back in 2017. More so just trying to liaise with everyone online and through phones instead of face-to-face, which is a massive task, but completed, and it was a success.
Yeah, definitely. I want to come back to the lockdown events in a moment. Just really looking at the things going on at the moment, as you mentioned there, we've got the pandemic going on, which has affected everyone around the world. But from your perspective, how difficult was it initially when all this came about, having your calendar of events, loads of events that you mentioned there, that you have weekend in, weekend out, being ripped up basically? Yeah,
so it was, as soon as it happened, I remember there was going to be a competition live on the weekend that the lockdown got announced, and that is a massive competition in the calendar. Northumberland is an area, it's thriving for darts. Chris Dorby, Callum Ridds, all the big names like that. There's a lot come from that area, so it's got a good following. And that, as soon as that was cancelled, it was like, wow, what's going on? And our initial reaction is everything's going to go down the pan. But so the idea. I can't remember, I seen something online, some guy like running a little competition online, and that's how it kind of progressed into what we were doing now, and I think it's just blown up with running competitions online and leagues. And one of the lads, I know we're going to touch on it a bit later, but the reason I got into it was one of the guys, local lads, Ali Patton, ran just a local competition, local league between a few of us, and it kind of just progressed from there, really. And I thought, like, there's something in this, but obviously we had to, kind of cement all the rules and regulations and how we're going to manage it. But again, we'll touch on that as well.
Yeah, just coming on to the events that we're seeing now during this lockdown, the expansion of online darts at home, and you guys getting involved in that as well. Your biggest events that you've had being the lockdown knockouts, the fourth one this past weekend. Lots of names in there that we'll recognise. 256 players, won by Ryan Joyce in the end. Just how difficult is it to get them events together and get all them players together to play the event and it to run smoothly?
Yeah, so it was a massive task. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have the following I've previously had. So with the North East, I've got a couple of Facebook groups, my website, some good connections within the darting world. I wouldn't have been able to do that without building that up prior to it. So that kind of fueled the entrance and the credibility of the event to get to that stage. I started off with 128. It started on a Wednesday night, midweek, then moved on, done another couple, 128, did a couple of different concepts, 4-man teams, some pairs, and then progressed to the 256. As mentioned, it's kind of the rules and regulations and how you kind of officiate these kind of competitions online. Obviously there's skeptics, there's been people that have made mistakes, cheating and whatnot, but obviously that was out the window, and we've kind of got to a certain level now that we kind of manage and be able to watch certain games. The rules are all set out in stone, everyone's aware of them, and I think everyone's used to them now. So it's obviously attracted some big names. Andy Bolton's entered, obviously got beaten off by Ryan. Chris Dobie, my brother, Ricky Evans entered, Luke Humphreys, a few other big names.
just looking at the lockdown knockouts in particular, it seems to have grown quite quickly in a relative short space of time. The one that you've just had, you said it was the biggest online payout that you've done to date during the lockdown. What was the prize fund? And for these events, are you looking to make them bigger and maybe increase the prize fund even further?
Yeah, definitely. So the prize fund was around about 1,400. What we did was I had a few volunteers helping us, and so a little bit of that money went towards them people helping us, which we can touch on as well. Through this all like online competitions, I had an idea. Obviously, streaming's been around for a while. The Icelandics do it. It's massive in North America and over the water with regards to streaming the players. And we obviously, it's not that much over here due to the PDC and their rules and contracts. But we thought it was an idea and wanted to do it. So that's how my YouTube channel, Northeast Darts TV, came about. So we were able to stream these players and broadcast it to kind of the amateur game to the rest of the public, just to keep some entertainment coming in. So a little bit of money went towards that, just funding that, as I've got another guy that's helping us, Matthew Hodgson, that's putting this Northeast Darts TV together with me. And the future of that is to broadcast a lot of our online competitions, as well as after lockdown, broadcasting the amateur game in all the pubs and clubs in the Northeast and streaming them live to YouTube. So that's the plan. Online, I'm probably looking to do another one. I've learned a couple of things from the past weekend. I may do the early stages in 2 different sessions just to manage it a little bit better, because obviously everyone's playing from the same board. There was 128 games all coming through, all the results coming through at once, so that was a lot to handle it within a short space of time. So that's a learning curve. But yeah, so looking to expand it, make it bigger and better. With the addition of Northeast Darts TV, there is sponsorship and advert opportunities that I may get in touch with people. And if there's anyone out there that would want to get involved, we've got nearly 700 subscribers in a week and a half, and we've got nearly 1,000 hours of playing time already.
Excellent. Yeah, it's good to see it going, and just want to finish really by going back to your brother Adam. He's obviously back on the tour this year after coming through Q School in January. As you mentioned earlier, still only 26, but he's been around the PDC darts for a long time. What's it like following his career as a brother, and I presume going through those highs and lows with him from a player that competes at the top level?
It's funny you say that, because our family, we literally live and breathe every single dart he throws, and it's a nightmare. We get more nervous than him. He's a laid-back character. He's a lot chilled out than us, but it's been great. I remember the first youth tour that we ever went. I remember he was playing Van Gerwen. I can't remember the score, I'm not sure of it. But back in 2011, I do believe Adam won the first youth tour event. First ever youth one. The likes of Joe Cullen, Ricky Evans, all them big names were in at Michael Smith. And Adam, won that. And that's what kind of catapulted him into the stage he is now, and following it throughout, ups and downs. I've been over Europe with him, travelled all the Euro tours. He's had some great wins, went down to PDC World. It's been a fantastic journey so far. But Adam's got a young family at the moment. I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a young lad called James, who's only born recently. So I think Adam's going to, in the next few years, he will kick on. He's still maturing and he's still understanding the professional game at that level, and now he's getting a little bit more older, a little bit more mature. I think he will kick on. He's got the ability, no doubt. So I'm sure he will kick on very shortly.
And lastly, for anyone listening who wants to follow Northeast Darts, we mentioned the website earlier, but what about anyone who wants to maybe get involved playing or maybe helping out? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, no problem. So I've got my whole Facebook group is built around Northeast Darts Promotions, so you can contact us on Facebook via that. For all online competitions, you can get in touch. It's Lockdown Knockout. My Facebook profile is Scott Northeast Darts, so if you just find us on there, give us a message. The next competition we're probably looking at is in the next couple of weeks, which will be held over a weekend, but I will release information via them groups and via the channels, so everyone will get the information direct. Great
stuff. Well, Scott, it's a pleasure to chat to you. Do keep up the great work that you're doing for darts in the North East, and we look forward to seeing everything that you've got coming up as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time, Alex. Thanks for inviting us on.
Thanks to Scott for joining us on the show this week. Now, moving on, the PDC Home Tour resumes with the second phase starting next Tuesday. But let's talk about the first phase. Who have you been most impressed with so far? And talk about the second phase now. Who do you fancy to win the entire thing?
Yeah, just starting by looking back at the first phase, I made a point of watching the last couple of nights, so Sunday night and Monday night, so maybe a little bit of recency bias behind this decision on who I think might go and win the whole thing, but some impressive performances from Joe Cullen on the Sunday. 3 of the top 8 averages, individual game averages from the whole of the home tour. He had them 107, 106, 105 to win that group on the Sunday and get through. And Peter Wright, the world champion, second attempt. Obviously, he was playing in the first night. It seems a long while ago now, 32 nights ago to be exact. He missed out on the first night, came back for the final night, and came through a tough group in the end against Christoph Ratajski, Justin Pipe, and Adam Hunt. So he's through. They've both impressed me. Peter Wright, 11 180s on that Monday night, which is a joint record for the home tour. Got to mention Jose de Souza as well, who played some outstanding darts to win his group. Luke Woodhouse, of course, getting the 9 darter back on night 2. But there's been some great stuff throughout the whole thing, and Ryan Searle as well, got to give him a mention. But who am I picking to win the whole thing? I'll give a couple of names out. I'll go with Chris Dobey and Peter Wright. They're my 2 to watch out for. So maybe them 2 will make the final, or maybe they'll both go out in the group stage next week.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned his best player so far. I mean, Joe Cullen was just absolutely on fire the other night. Luke Humphreys as well, and Luke Humphreys didn't do that poorly the first time around, finishing second in his group, averaging nearly 90. Back earlier in the competition when players were struggling a bit more. I think as the tournament progressed and as players saw what it was more like, I think they might have just gotten confidence from each other and started to feel more comfortable on the stage, because the quality did improve over the course. But obviously as well, Jose de Souza just leading the way, averaging nearly 105 across his 3 matches. Just that was brilliant. Luke Woodhouse throwing in the 9 darter. There were a lot of really impressive players in the first stage. But it's going to be tough to pick out a winner, because the group stage format, even if they're now going to best out of 11 as opposed to best out of 9, it's still short matches, and you can still lose one and get through the group. Do I have to pick someone? Do I have to throw out a name?
Yeah, go
on. You know what? Let's go for someone who's never won a tournament before. Let's go for Luke Humphreys to win it. I'm gonna say it. I picked him to be the first ever challenger to win in the Premier League, and he did it. I'm gonna pick him to be the first winner of the Darts at Home League. So there we go. I'm gonna go for a bit of a long shot, but I'm going Luke Humphreys.
Fair play. We'll keep an eye out for those picks next week when the home tour resumes. So we'll finish up with some listener questions. First one comes in from @Zach_Ward 1989. He says, Barry Hearn said that events won't be cancelled, but simply rescheduled. Do you think that this is likely, as this is going to congest the schedule for 2021? And do you think he would bring darts events back with social distancing measures with no fans when they play such a big part?
I think you're going to have to bring some events back without crowds. And you're probably going to have to cancel some events as well. I don't see how we're going to end up having the full complement of 13 European Tour events this year, especially not all 13 with crowds, because it's not just going to be up to the PDC about crowds, but it's going to be up to the countries. You might see that they might limit capacity, but you might also see some countries that are going to have a full ban on crowds at sporting events for some time, and I think that's not just a possibility. I think that's a likelihood. As far as canceling television events, as Barry Hearn said, that's not the plan right now, but I think we still just don't know. I think, if you end up losing half the European Tour events, canceling the European Championships might follow suit as well. I think the Players' Championship and finals will still happen. I think that's an easy one to still go, assuming players can travel. Some of those shorter events, but we'll keep going. But maybe the week-long events, maybe the Grand Slam will have to be pushed off another year. Maybe the Grand Prix. But I do think some events will be canceled. European Tour as well as TV events, especially if it's a while before we're able to get fans back in.
Yeah, that's a good point you make there as well about the European Championship. If we don't get many European Tour events, that's how they do the qualifying criteria for that. It's not going to go down too well, and obviously with the Players' Championship finals as well, But yeah, it's I think we will see some events cancelled, and we've seen the rescheduling of pretty much all the World Series events, which we've touched on, but they probably are cancelled for this year because they're probably going to go ahead again next year. So that's a shame for them. And one that we didn't mention as well, the Champions League of darts, that's one event that's fallen by the wayside, a TV event later on in the year. That's one that's been cancelled for this year. But yeah, I think we simply are going to run out of time if we keep going. That the calendar is stacked in a usual year. There's not many free weekends, and we're just going to simply see that we're not going to have enough time to fit in all these events in 2020. And going into 2021, I don't think there's going to be too many events that they'll want to cross over. They might cross over the World Championship a little bit further than they already do, but I don't think they'll want to put too many more events from this season going into 2021. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Hopefully we'll see some events going again soon with regards to social distancing, the Players Championship events. I think that's probably what we're going to be seeing next when we do. I'm not quite sure when that is, but I do think the next events we'll see will be Players Championship events with the social distancing measures before we see TV events with crowds.
Now, next question comes from at AM Sinclair 97. Well, shouldn't say the next question. The next request, we'll call it, for a detailed breakdown of the early action of the Bang Average Darts League. Alex, you want to give us that?
I'd love to, and I'd love to tell you about 101 checkout that I took out in my first game, but unfortunately I got nowhere near the double 17, so that didn't happen. That would have been the highest checkout of the Bang Average Darts League. But yeah, something that just came about really. One of our listeners getting in touch on Twitter saw that myself and Andrew, who asked the question, we play games every Saturday, and said he'd love to play us and maybe get a league going with different players of similar abilities to us. And yeah, that's what we've done. We had 20 people in the end get in touch, split it into two groups of 10. My brother's playing as well. And yeah, we've just said we'll play games twice a week over online, obviously playing from our own homes and playing the best of 6 legs. You can have a 3-all draw or first to 4. And yeah, been good so far. We've seen some very good averages, actually. One touching into the 60 mark, a few in the 50s as well. Myself not quite getting to that standard just yet, but yeah, been some good games. And shout out to Andy Francis, who beat me 2-1 up. I was against him, but he came back and won 4-2. So fair play to him for picking up the win. And thanks everyone for getting involved. And there's been a few people that have said about wanting to play in it, so hopefully we'll do a second one as well. And who knows, the league might be going international. We might be getting a certain Mr. Burton DeWitt involved.
We'll see. I would like to participate in the next go of it. I think my break from darts is finally approaching its end, and been playing a little Nintendo 64 instead of darts for the last few weeks, but I think I'm ready to pick up the arrows again.
Good to hear. Well, last question then coming in, and this last week the PDC put out a video debate with Dan Dawson, Wayne Mardle, Rod Studd and Stuart Pike. We mentioned it in the interview with Dan earlier on. Who are the top 5 greatest players ever? Who have you got?
Well, I might surprise a little bit on this list. First and foremost, because I'm not going to put Mark Walsh on it, but also Dan Dawson said, I think everyone is in agreement on the top 3, but I'm actually kind of not. I'm going to put Michael Van Gerwen number 1. I'm going to put Phil Taylor number 2. But I'm actually going to put Raymond van Barneveld ahead of Eric Bristow for number 3, just because of the how long he was able to remain a top player, and how dominant he was for an extended period of time. We don't know how many world championships he would have won had he been in the PDC earlier, or had there never been the split and Phil Taylor and Raymond van Barneveld had been able to coexist. But it's not a coincidence that Phil Taylor hit his best after Raymond van Barneveld switched over and stole a bunch of major titles from him. He made Phil Taylor become that much better because of how better Raymond van Barneveld was for that first year than Phil Taylor. So I think I'm going to put Barney ahead of Eric Bristow because he was able to maintain that level for much longer than Bristow was. But I think it's a big drop off whoever's 5th. I think I'm going to go John Lowe, but there's a lot of players who you can make an argument for that 5th spot, and it's not meant to be disrespectful for them. I just think the top 4, not the top 3, the top 4, are just that much above number 5 historically.
Yeah, it's an intriguing debate, and if you haven't watched it, go and check it out on the PDC's YouTube channel. Those 4 are discussing it. For me, and I put this up on Twitter, I think, in the summer last year. It's a debate that comes up every now and then. I've got Phil Taylor number 1. I've got Eric Bristow number 2. Michael Van Gogh number 3. Raymond van Barneveld number 4. And this is number 5. Doesn't get mentioned that often, but I've gone Trina Gulliver, the 10-time ladies world champion, in at number 5. So a few different ones there to what most people would put out. And we ask you guys as well, the listeners, get in touch with us at Weekly Dartscast on Twitter. Let us know what your top 5 greatest players ever are. I'm sure there's going to be different ones to us, and I'm sure there will be some people out there that will get Mark Walsh and Co Stompy in there somehow.
Yes, even if we weren't able to manage that. But anything else for this week?
Got to say, thanks to our guests for joining us. Really appreciate them coming on, and thanks everyone who's got involved with the Bang Average Darts League. Great to get that up and running this week. Keep an eye out on this feed. Next week, we're going to have the Darts Legends series joined by Colin Lloyd. A really good chat, that one of the best ones I think we've done so far. So really looking forward to bringing that to you guys on Monday next week. Tomorrow, of course, get involved with the Low 6 competition that we're doing, the Weekly Dartscast Lucky Dip. Download Low 6 or weeklydartscast.com/Low6. Use the promo code Dartscast for a free £3 bet. Get yourself involved in that. Challenge us. Of course, when you go on there, you'll see our picks, who we're picking to win the games, and be great to get all you guys involved in that. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening as well.
Yes, as Alex said, you'll see who we pick, so you'll know to make a different selection if you want to increase your bankroll. But of course, you can bet whatever we suggest. We just don't necessarily recommend that. But I hope everyone is staying safe. I hope everyone is getting through this the best they can. We'll be back sometime soon, hopefully, to recap. Maybe in the next couple of weeks to recap the final stages of the PDC Darts at Home League, and hopefully with some more news on what the calendar will bring us, as well as, of course, obviously, to update on what everyone cares about, the Bang Average Darts League. But for Alex Moss, I am Burton DeWitt. Thank you for listening. We will be back sometime fairly soon. You'll just have to hang tight until then.